Whether or not a character is important to A Song of Ice and Fire is something of a moving target. If you look at the three characters who anybody on the street would likely say are the main players of this saga, those being Tyrion, Daenerys, and Jon Snow, each of them have books in the series where they really aren't a focus. Specifically, if we're going back to the series' very beginning, its roots, Ned Stark is pretty clearly the main character of A Game of Thrones. Jon Snow doesn't have a ton to do, we're mostly getting introduced to the Watch. Tyrion is at his lowest number of chapters ever. And while Daenerys is actually a main character in A Game of Thrones, having 10 chapters, which is a lot and tied for the most she's ever had, the next two books, A Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords, both feature a very small number of Daenerys chapters as compared to the rest of the story. When looking forward to the series' future, there are elements that I think fans take for granted, namely these three being the main characters, the main players in the story writ large. I think there is one character who people are very much discounting as this person is poised to become not only a major player in Westeros, but to have an excellent internal character arc that I believe has already been perfectly set up. This person has only already had 2 chapters in the series past and is fairly new as a viewpoint and is one of my favorites, or I believe will be one of my favorites. It's not John Connington, as you might think, it's Arianne Martell, Princess of Dorne. Arianne's origins are quite unique in terms of characters that would be considered to be main characters in Ice and Fire. She's a mega prologue viewpoint character. For those who don't know, I did a video on this a while ago now, but back when Martin was writing A Dance with Dragons and A Feast for Crows, back when it was one book, he wanted to have one massive prologue chapter that in itself had chapters, and that would be about 200 pages long. I think it ended up being 250 pages long, and that part of the story fell apart and ended up being absorbed as real, actual viewpoint chapters, which is where we get all of the Dornish and Ironborn viewpoints in A Feast for Crows. Arion then receives 2 chapters in A Feast for Crows, both of which have excellent titles, those being The Queenmaker and The Princess in the Tower, dealing with this political scheme that she hatches to crown Marcella as Queen of the Seven Kingdoms under Dornish law. That plan completely explodes in 50 different ways. Marcella gets her face cut off, or partially cut off. Her friend, air quotes, Eris Oakheart ends up getting decapitated by Areo Hotah, and she ends up isolated in this tower, hence the Princess in the Tower, for the latter part of A Feast for Crows. But at the end of that chapter, we see her and her father finally have a heart-to-heart, as they'd had this rift for so many years, as Arion had found this correspondence to Quentyn, where Duran told him that one day he would be a ruler of Dorne, which is strange, given that in Dorne, women inherit before, or not before men, as the same as men, and Arion is a woman and also older than Quentyn, so theoretically, she should be the one inheriting Dorne. Duran, her father, tells her that there's this plot that she was not privy to, that he wants justice, fire, and blood, that she was initially promised to Viserys Targaryen, but she could not be informed of this, as this plan was too secret to ever really be revealed to anyone outside of the immediate necessities of it. We see this information does notably change Arianne's demeanor. While she doesn't appear as a viewpoint character in A Dance with Dragons, she does appear in the book. We have one chapter in Dorne from Areo Hotah's perspective entitled The Watcher, where we see her not only kind of continuing this scheming on her own, but very much falling in line with her father's vision and listening to what he wants for Dorne. That continues into the Winds of Winter. And the first big kind of red flag for me that is screaming Arianne is going to be a big character in this book is what we have of the Winds of Winter so far, as Arianne is one of only 3 characters to have 2 chapters for the Winds of Winter already released. And I should also say, Arianne's 2 chapters that are already released are pretty significant. The other 2 characters to receive 2 chapters so far, I said two too many times in that sentence, but it's fine. The 2 other characters are Tyrion and Barristan Selmy, both of whom are in the middle of a battle, meaning that all of their chapters are a bit shorter, more action-packed and condensed. And additionally, Tyrion is a character that Martin loves to give a billion chapters regardless of what's going on, and Barristan Selmy is someone who is probably going to die in the immediate future in the Battle of Fire, and likely will not have much page space in the future of the story, so maybe Martin is giving him what he can now. Whereas Arianne is just a character going on this journey, going on this adventure, questing to meet this new potential prince, which I'll get into in a minute. She is receiving all of this material, despite not being in a battle or being Martin's favorite character, so to speak. Arianne's arc in The Winds of Winter seems set to be an interesting one. Dorn and Duran Martell, specifically Arianne's father, are defined by inaction in the main series. He's been waiting and plotting and scheming for so many years, only for all of his goals to completely fall apart as unexpected things come up and people keep dying, like his brother Oberyn, and though Duran doesn't know it yet, his son Quentin. Arianne Martell at present is very much following her dad's orders to a T. She's being sent to treat with Prince Aegon Targaryen and Lord John Connington to figure out whether or not they're the real deal and whether or not they should be supported by the Spears of Dorne. Arianne and Doran being in lockstep is pretty unique for her perspective so far, and in her chapters for The Winds of Winter, which I believe are incredibly underrated, we see her kind of beginning to chafe against that as she kind of doesn't like the idea of maybe Quentin being king if he were to marry Daenerys and these things like that she should be doing rather than playing it safe and figuring things out from Griffin's Roost. She instead decides to sail to Storm's End to go and meet John Connington, which is the last decision of her second chapter, framed as something of a turning point in her arc. I think with Arion Martell, George R. R. Martin is trying to set up the fact that Duran Martell is incorrect about the way he has gone about things. He has lived his life solely for revenge, plotting meticulously to achieve that aim. Martin doesn't like revenge, though. If we look at the stories of revenge in Ice and Fire, we see it's kind of a fruitless path that makes monsters of people. Look at Lady Stoneheart, for example. And Duran is kind of the exact opposite, whereas Stoneheart is going out and taking action against the Freys and Lannisters herself, being boots on the ground and actively executing those who she believes, or correctly believes, have wronged her family. Duran is sitting back waiting for the perfect moment to come, but everything ends up falling apart before that moment can happen because people are people. Human beings are inherently variable creatures, and these things keep changing to the point where Duran really isn't able to keep up with things, but Arion might be. I also want to ask, do you think Arion is going to have as big of a role as I do? Who do you think is going to have the most chapters and wins? Let me know in the comments below while you're down there. Leave a like and subscribe and do the hype thing, whatever that does. I really appreciate it, and it is all free and does help the channel. I've had something of a realization recently that I think very much informs this part of the story. Specifically, I think that Arion Martell contains parts of Sansa Stark that George R. R. Martin realized he could not realize with the scrapping of the 5 year gap. Initially, between A Storm of Swords and A Dance with Dragons, we were going to have a 5 year break where our characters were going to grow and develop into their own rights. In the case of Sansa Stark, it would involve her becoming this competent schemer and gaining her own agency rather than being a pawn of those around her. While I do think that that is still going to happen in The Winds of Winter, I don't think it can quite happen to as much of an extent as Martin might have wanted to see happen. Specifically, Sansa's only 14 in the text right now. All of these Stark children are at way too young ages to be doing the things they're going to be doing, but there are other elements that I think very much could be shifted from Sansa to Arianne in the story as a whole. First and foremost, kind of breaking out from under a schemer. While I do think that Sansa is going to end up doing that with Littlefinger, Arianne and Duran are sort of an inversion on this that I really like, and I think it's very interesting to compare and contrast the two. This ties into a fairly old and fairly controversial fan theory, that being the Ashford theory about Sansa's potential suitors. That might sound familiar to eagle-eared viewers, if eagles can hear well, that being the kind of setting of the Hedge Knight and A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, this tournament at Ashford. This doesn't spoil anything in terms of the actual story itself, or at least the way I'm telling it will not, but the champions at this tournament do very much match up to Sansa's suitors in the main series, kind of uncannily at points. Specifically, we have a Baratheon, a Tyrell, a Lannister, a Harding, and then a Targaryen. And if we look at Sansa's suitors, we have Joffrey Baratheon. She is said to be married to Willis Tyrell at one point. Tyrion Lannister, who she marries. Harding is a very small house in the Vale, and we now know that Harry the Heir is this marriage candidate for Sansa, pitched by Littlefinger, so she can also have a claim on the Vale in addition to the North. And then ending with a Targaryen has caused a lot of people to question it. It's led to a lot of people thinking, oh, Sansa's going to marry Aegon, but no, I think it means Arianne is going to marry Aegon. That might sound insane, but you need to think about when The Hedge Knight was written. This does seem like deliberate seeding from George R. R. Martin, with these houses in this order and including something as minor as House Harding. But this was in 1997. The Hedge Knight was the second A Song of Ice and Fire thing written. It came out before the second book in the series, A Clash of Kings. The world was not yet developed. At the point that this story was written, there was going to be a 5-year gap. So Sansa could have ended up married to whoever the false Targaryen was going to be at that point, be it either Aegon himself or if Aegon was going to be a bright flame at some point in the story. I digress. But I think the Ashford theory is something interesting, and it does show some intentionality from Martin's kind of plotting at this point in the series, but I do think it is a victim of things changing with the times and with the evolving series. I do think that Arianne being set up in this way and having these chapters early on in the Winds of Winter and likely having more chapters beyond this is setting her up as our main window into this new political force emerging in Westeros. That is the cause behind Aegon the Sixth Targaryen. Arianne is a very interesting character in that context. She brings with her the Spears of Dorne, the support of House Martell, and she will likely marry Aegon Targaryen, or Aegon Blackfire, as it were. Regardless of that, Aegon's main characterization in the series so far has just been teenager, and I think that Arianne is going to take a much more active role in figuring out the politics of this new realm and setting Aegon's rule to rights. Of course, we have another viewpoint in this camp as well, Jon Connington, but I don't think, tragically, this is me saying this, so it's going to be bad, but I don't think we're going to have a ton of Jon Connington chapters going forward. I think the main thing he's going to provide is insight into his own mental state and grayscale, and maybe some of what's going around him. But overall, I think Arianne is our main character in this Aegon plot, as it does very much need someone with a concrete stake in it, so it isn't just kind of an outside force moving against our characters that we don't really have any concrete insight into. I also think there is at least one prophetic role that Arianne is going to play, specifically being the younger, more beautiful queen who's going to cast Cersei down and take everything she holds dear. That being specifically the throne. And then I also think that Arianne kind of will represent Cersei's early vision of herself marrying the Targaryen prince, Aegon's supposed father, Rhaegar, that Cersei never truly got to realize. I think there are a number of other candidates who could be the younger, more beautiful queen, but I do think the point of that prophecy is simply how many people it could be and how inherently correct it is in the concept of just this system of rulership, regardless, because there's always going to be a younger queen as you're going to age up, and whoever you were married to, who's the king, is going to die as well. It is also worth noting that after reading her second Winds of Winter sample chapter, Martin was asked how he reaches endings for characters in this story, and he referenced that he does have a concrete end state in mind for Arianne Martell, but not someone like Feathers, who's the guy who's tending her ravens in that sample chapter. I think this does bode well for Arianne's future. Aegon's cause is concretely doomed from like 20 different angles, but she is the one character that I am fairly confident could survive it. Overall, she is one of my favorite characters in terms of evaluating future possibilities for the Winds of Winter, as I think she still has a lot left to give in this series, and I'm very excited to see it. Oh, also, sidebar, I've seen people discuss whether House Martell is going to go extinct. I don't see any world in which Martin is going to kill baby Trystane Martell, who's only like 6 or 7 years old. He's done nothing wrong, and he is very far away from any danger, and Martin has directly confirmed that Daenerys isn't going to burn Dorne, so I'm sure he'll be fine. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and it does really help grow the channel. I have many more videos for you in the very near future on A Song of Ice and Fire, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, House of the Dragon, and Game of Thrones. So I hope you'll stick around for all of that, as it is very fun to share all of this with all of you. And yeah, of course, if you have any video ideas or topics or suggestions, let me know in the comments as well. I'd love to hear what people want to see discussed.